Hello friends, this your friend Saiyan Nexus Audio Fanfic and we are back in new fanfic. What if Gine went to Earth with Goku, the Saiyan mother who changed everything? Part 1. Prologue. The mess hall was extremely busy today. Gine chopped slab after slab of meat in the kitchen, trying to keep pace and not get too overheated in the cramped area. The main dining room was packed with Saiyan planetary purging crews. They were all either laughing, shouting, fighting, or drinking, creating a cacophony of sound that drowned out her own thoughts. The heat of so many sweaty bodies together in conjunction with the thick hot air of their world was making the work more unbearable by the minute. Everyone had just returned from their off-world missions, on Frieza's orders for all Saiyans to return to planet Vegeta. No one knew why, and it was certainly the buzz in the air among everybody. Rumors ranging from one big job to be announced or a great reward for all they've done, but also complaints about how they've all been pulled from their conquests. There wasn't much that Saiyans hated more than being denied a great fight or losing one, but they were not going to question Frieza's orders. No one in their right mind did. Gine was in the middle of slicing another giant beast leg when someone shoved past her, making her drop the cleaver. It lodged itself onto the cutting table less than a hair's breadth from one of her fingers. Despite the armored gloves she wore, it still could have ended badly. Angry, she wheeled around to see the head butcher rushing away and past other kitchen staff. "Hey, watch it," Gine called out to him. The butcher turned to look back at her. He was much bigger and more mean-looking than her. "What's the matter, weakling? Did I push you too hard?" he said mockingly. Now Gine was more than angry. She was used to this kind of slander against her strength as a Saiyan, but she wouldn't stand for being mistreated for following basic kitchen safety. "You almost made me lose a finger," she yelled, holding up the cleaver and the digit it nearly severed. Almost immediately she regretted speaking up when he rushed back toward her, shoving several other workers aside and stopped just in front of her, shoving his face nearly into hers. "Oh yeah, well, what are you gonna do about it?" he threatened. The other kitchen staff stared at them awaiting her response. Gine shrunk where she stood, willing herself not to show how humiliated she felt. She had experienced this kind of game far too often throughout her life. Being pushed around by other Saiyans for no other reason than being a particularly sorry excuse of a warrior. Being goaded into a fight that she would surely lose, be laughed at and forgotten about. Rinse and repeat. She had it happen far too many times to count, but had never gotten fully numb to it either way. The butcher was no exception, as he reveled in causing her trouble for the fun of it. He had nothing better to do than run a kitchen, for like her he could never return to the front lines, but she suspected he wanted to feel better about himself if someone was weaker than him as subordinates. That still didn't make it feel any more bearable, but where else could she get work? The butcher's lips curled smugly. HMPH. That's what I thought. How pathetic. He turned around and marched off as if nothing happened. The rest of the staff went back to work also pretending they didn't see anything, but she could see some of them snickering at her. Jerks. Gine cursed under her breath as she went back to chopping again. She briefly fantasized that the piece of meat she was slicing was the butcher's face as she drove the cleaver through it as hard as she could. That was never going to happen, but it was the only comforting thing she could think of. Gine. She stopped chopping and looked up. Her foul mood immediately evaporated. Through the bombardment of sounds in the mess hall, Gine knew that voice anywhere. Her kind eyes, kinder than any Saiyan eyes should have, lit up in surprise and excitement when she saw who that voice belonged to. "Bardock," she called back. Ecstatic for reprieve from working in this hellhole and seeing her partner, Gine set the cleaver down and ran her way through the crowd. Weaving her way around burly and rude customers towards the only particular Saiyan whose hair resembled a palm tree. A dashing crisscrossed scar ran across his cheek. "Hey," she greeted Bardock with a smile and hugged him tightly. He hugged her back too, which she thought was interesting since he was always somewhat distant even in their most intimate of moments. But she enjoyed it immensely. It's been months since she's seen him. I didn't think I'd see you for a while, even with this recall that's going on, Gine said as they held each other. When they parted, she looked up at him, and Gine's expression fell into one of concern. Bardock just stared at her, and through her as if he didn't notice that she was talking to him. The look in his eyes made him seem haunted, and, if she could believe it, sad. Like he must have seen something unspeakably horrible. What's wrong? She asked quietly, resting her hands on his shoulders reassuringly. Bardock snapped out of his trance and looked at her. How's? He began to say, but the sound of glass shattering made him stop and jerk toward the sound on reflex. The commotion in the mess hall was going up a couple notches. The patrons were getting rowdier. They started bumping into them and cut off Bardock from speaking further. Gine groaned from the noisy fumbling of drunkards and decided to take their reunion outside. Come with me, Gine said as she took Bardock by the hand and forced their way through the crowd of the mess hall, out the entrance and into the open. On the streets, the capital city of planet Vegeta was bustling with activity. It had been a very long time since the entire Saiyan population was back on the planet at once. Thousands of people were out and about, walking by and conversing with old long-lost comrades or picking fights with strangers, but out here at least Gine and Bardock could hear each other. The intense heat of the red giant that was their world's sun bore down on them in the late afternoon. Way up in the sky, faintly visible, was Frieza's command ship in orbit. While she and Bardock stood there outside, he looked up at the vessel for a very long moment with a mixture of emotions she couldn't read on him. Bardock. She got his attention again, his behavior starting to worry her. What's wrong? She repeated. He looked at her more focused this time. Gine, how is Kakarot? Kakarot? Gine asked in surprise. Saiyan fathers rarely if ever asked their mates about the well-being of their offspring after they were born, let alone the second-born of low-class warriors who were pathetically weak. As was the aforementioned child he was asking after. Much like herself, even as a firstborn she never knew who her father was. Yet it seemed like something else was bothering Bardock. He's been doing great, Gine answered, confused by his question. He's out of the conditioner now and is almost ready for his first mission. Once the recall is lifted, that is. Bardock remained silent for a moment. Then he asked, can I see him? Gine was taken aback. Now that was very un-Saiyan-like for him. Usually once Saiyans mated they went their separate ways, but she and Bardock were something different. They were one of the few to have actually formed an emotional bond through their physical coupling. But still, children were of no importance once they were conceived, especially weak ones, which were usually disowned. But not her, for Gine was far too empathic to be like any average Saiyan mother. Sure, it made her an outcast of their society to be so emotionally soft, but she loved her two boys regardless. Why do you want to see him? She asked suspiciously. Are you gonna tell me what's going on first? Just let me see him, okay? He snapped at her, then collected himself and asked again more calmly. I just need to. There is something I have to tell you, but first, I need to see Kakarot. Can you take me to him? Now Gine was worried. She knew Bardock was as nonchalant as a Saiyan could be, no matter how bad things could get. She had seen him in battle, and even if it seemed like they were going to be killed, he kept on going as if it were business as usual. He only showed an ounce of concern if he ever saw her hurt, which was touching if she could make someone as steely as Bardock open up somehow. Seeing him now almost begging her to see his son, and admitting he had something to tell her, made her feel that something was very wrong. Oh okay, come with me then. She complied. Whether what he had to say was good or not, she was happy for the excuse to go see her son. Hoping her coworkers and boss wouldn't mind her absence for a bit, Gine led Bardock through the streets of the capital city. The crowds here were very combative. She had to dodge in between street fights ranging between just two warriors to all-out brawls that were breaking out. With so many Saiyans in one place, fights were bound to happen out here, but they had no time to join in on the fun. Eventually, Gine and Bardock reached the main medical complex. All the doctors and emergency personnel were out dealing with the violence breaking out on the streets. The populace was getting restless. Making their way through the maze of corridors to the nursery, she noticed Bardock looking around as if worried that others might see them. She didn't understand the paranoia, but hopefully he would explain once they saw their son. Here, Gine said as they reached the correct door to the nursery. They could already hear the sound of their baby crying from inside. Once the door opened, they saw Kakarot in his cradle, bawling his eyes out. He had quite a set of lungs, for his ear-piercing cry made Gine and Bardock wince. He even made the infants next to him start to cry too. She felt bad for leaving him all alone in this place, even though the nursery had security systems and the robotic nurses that could attend to his every need. But hearing him crying from being alone without her always tore Gine's heart open. "Hey, you," Gine said lovingly to Kakarot as she approached him. Immediately he started to calm down, his sobs turning to whimpers and finally thankful cooing when picked up by the loving hands of his mother. She too felt all her fear and worries disappear when she held the most precious thing to her safely in her embrace. She was amazed Kakarot had been able to get a mission in the first place. He was born with a battle power of only 2, a power so low that he would not have made it past the conditioning process alone. Being injected with vaccines for every known disease in the galaxy and having programs to kill all intelligent life on whatever planet they landed on implanted in their brains, it really took a toll on an infant. Raditz barely made it through his conditioning after he was born, and he was far stronger than his younger brother. Gine figured Kakarot must have inherited his curse of weakness from her. She never had the Saiyan fighting spirit and thus was never fit to be a warrior, let alone have the dignity of being called a Saiyan for being so weak physically and emotionally. It was why she was removed from the front lines. She still did what she could to support the Saiyans' crews by working in meat processing, but she knew that everyone thought of her as a disgrace to their species. Even Bardock thought so out loud sometimes. But he saw something in her that went beyond what a scouter said, something that really felt like there was a place in this universe for her. She treasured that, and from it, they spawned 2 sons. But Bardock still felt that they had been cursed by her weakness, especially for his youngest. Yet, here he was, wanting to see him. Maybe there was something special about her boy after all. Well, Gine turned towards Bardock with baby Kakarot in her arms. "Here he is," she said with joy in her voice as she held out Kakarot to him. Bardock took hold of him and looked at his son intently. He was already a few months old and growing fast, and he looked so much like him. He had his untamable hair, sharp nose and cheekbones. But Kakarot had his mother's eyes, which she knew dismayed Bardock. Giving their son the face of a revoltingly gentle soul that resembled nothing like the thoroughbred warrior to be that Raditz was. And yet, there was something very special about Kakarot that Gine knew he had. And in that moment, it seemed like Bardock saw something in Kakarot too. For he was looking into Kakarot's curious eyes like it held the secrets of the universe within them. What was her partner thinking? Kakarot whimpered from his father's rough touch. Bardock's expression changed to that of worry as he tried to calm his son down by holding him as gently as he could, but was too late as the boy started crying again. Bardock sighed in defeat and handed Kakarot back to Gine. "You're not too good with kids." She chuckled as she her son back into her arms. Was all Bardock said. He never took his gaze off of Kakarot, looking almost mesmerized. "You know, I'm really glad you wanted to see him," Gine said. It's not often a Saiyan father would ever want to see his children out of paternal feelings. He looked back up at her yet looked past her like he wasn't listening. Now, Gine said, her expression turning serious. Are you finally going to tell me what's really going on with you? Bardock hesitated for a moment, looking around the nursery at the monitors and back out into the corridor. Right. Wait here, he said as he sprinted back out into the hallway. Gine thought he was just going to leave her standing there with Kakarot, but he returned quickly. Come with me, he told her in a conspiratorial tone. She wasn't sure what he was up to but had the inclination that whatever it was, he was trying to keep discreet. But why? Gine followed him back out into the corridor with Kakarot still cradled in her arms. They rounded a corner, and he motioned her into a doorway that led into a cramped broom closet filled with dirty cleaning equipment and reeking of disinfectant. It was a good place if one wanted privacy. Bardock took one last look down both ways of the corridor and stepped inside, sealing the door behind him. Then he faced Gine, looking her in the eye as he spoke. Frieza is going to destroy our planet and kill us all. Gine said nothing for a few seconds as she tried to digest his words. When she did, her eyes widened in utter astonishment. What? She nearly screamed, just as Bardock pressed a hand to her mouth to shush her. Keep your damn voice down, he hissed, looking over his shoulder at the door as if worried someone was right outside, listening in. After a few moments he circled back to Gine, uncovering her mouth. What do you mean Frieza is going to destroy us all? She said more quietly but still in disbelief. Do you remember that injury I suffered on Kanasa? Bardock asked. Gine was confused by his tangent of a question. She did indeed remember that day, how she worried that he was almost killed by one inhabitant still alive on that planet. He came out unscathed, but since then he was always distracted or complaining of headaches and nightmares. She didn't know what to make of it then. Yeah, I remember that, she replied, but what does that have to do with? Something else happened to me on that day. Bardock cut her off, trying to explain. I know you may not believe me, but the last Kanashan that attacked me did something to me. Said it was some sort of curse he wished to inflict on the Saiyans as a whole for killing his people. He spat in disgust at that, then continued. I'm not entirely sure myself, but I think he gave me some sort of psychic ability to see the future. See the future? Gine repeated, sounding even more disbelieving. Bardock nodded. That's what's been giving me all those headaches and nightmares recently. They're visions I keep seeing of planet Vegeta getting destroyed. And in those visions, I saw Frieza. He would launch some sort of attack that will make our planet explode. And he was laughing the whole time. Bardock said with anger laced in his voice. I don't know if it's real or not, but the visions kept on getting more and more clear. I'd see more details, and the pain of all of us dying felt so real. And finally seeing exactly how Frieza does it. I think it's going to happen soon. As the moment of that event gets closer, I feel more and more like it's becoming true. It would make sense as to why he's recalled all Saiyans back to our planet and ordered no more launches from here. I think he intends to wipe us all out at once. And very soon. Gine stood there in silence when he was finished, completely at a loss for words until she found her voice again. But why? She asked incredulously, feeling hysteria rising within her. Why would he do such a thing? We've been his most loyal soldiers. Kakarot started crying, sensing the fear and anger radiating from his parents. Gine tried to soothe him by rocking him in her arms, but it did no good. She was too focused on Bardock and her gripping Kakarot too overprotectively tight. I don't know, Bardock answered. I've been asking myself that same question this whole time. But I do know that I have a gut feeling that something terrible is about to happen, and these visions seem to be confirming that. Gine couldn't believe what she was hearing. She couldn't. This had to be a bad dream. What he said sounded crazy, and by all rights it was. If she heard this revelation from anyone else, she'd thought they were either lying or had lost their minds. But Bardock never lied to her. He was blunt and straightforward with her to a fault. As distant and cold as he could be, she trusted him with her life and the lives of her children. But it couldn't be true. Could it? I know it's hard to believe, he said, as if he were reading her mind. But I swear to you it's the truth. Gine's legs felt weak, like they were about to give out under her. See, can't we do anything about it? Warn others or something? She tried to think of some solution. Something. Anything. Bardock looked genuinely surprised at her. You believe me? I do, she said, sounding as afraid as she looked. But I don't want to. There was a flash of appreciation in his eyes before it was replaced with his steely gaze again. I tried to tell everyone I could, he said, in answer to her question. But no one believes me. Not even the king of all people. His tone then turned angry and defeated. And I think it may not even help if anybody does believe me anyway. If Frieza suspects that we know he's going to attack us, and if we try to fight back or flee, he might just kill us all now to prevent that. Gine was speechless. He was right. None of those ideas would work. Frieza was far too powerful to take on, even if they hurled the might of the entire population of the planet against him. And his forces could shoot down any evacuation they tried. So, it's true. Her voice cracking. In the span of a few minutes, her entire world came crashing down, knowing that they were all going to die very soon. This can't be happening, she croaked, her voice trembling in fear and despair, tears starting to form. She unconsciously clutched Kakarot closer to her chest. He started crying, sensing what she felt. Kakarot. The very idea that her little baby boy was going to die, along with her, made her feel physically ill in a way she couldn't even put into words. She wanted all this to just be a nightmare, trying desperately to think that this wasn't real, and she would wake up at any moment. Her heart thundered in her ears, despair threatening to overtake her. Bardock grabbed her shoulders, snapping her out of her thoughts of death. Gine, stay calm, okay? We need to get Kakarot off this planet. Huh? She asked, then remembered what he said. How? I have a plan, he answered, trying to keep his voice down but steady. If we can steal an infiltration pod from the launch facility and send it off from the far side of the planet, away from Frieza, then we might just be able to sneak him away from here before anything happens. Gine thought of this, then doubts started coming to her. But wouldn't they detect him? Frieza placed a no-launch order on all purging flights, including infiltration babies. Bardock glanced down at his son, who was looking up at him and his mother in fear, as if he knew they were discussing his very fate. I don't think they will. He has such a weak power level that I don't think it will register on their scouters unless they were actively searching for him. Gine thought she heard Bardock chuckle to himself, as if the irony of the situation was making itself known to him. Here he was, a Saiyan father who wanted nothing to do with his weakling of a second-born son, being confronted with his species' own imminent extinction, now saw that his son's very weakness would save him from death, and was going to do everything he could to make it happen. She supposed it was funny in a morbid kind of way. She sensed that Bardock had more to say, and he did. And, in a lot of the visions I had, I saw Kakarot too. I saw him all grown up. Gine was taken aback. Really? Yes. I don't know why, but something tells me that his survival is critical. That it may have something to do with this. Bardock said as he gazed down at his son. And if my visions are true, then Kakarot will survive. He must. A surge of hope filled Gine that wasn't there before. You sure that will work? She asked, desperate. Bardock looked up at her. He looked like he still wasn't 100% sure himself, but all things considered, they didn't have many options. It may be our only chance to save him, Bardock said to her with finality. Gine looked down at baby Kakarot in her embrace. She almost wanted to start crying. They were going to send him off so soon, out into the unknown to escape certain death, and it frightened her. She'll never get to see him again, or worse, if they detect his pod, they will kill him. They will kill him. Those words rang in her mind. She couldn't stomach that, the precious life in her arms taken from this world not even half a year old. She wanted to scream. But, still, she trusted Bardock. Hell, she even loved him. And she trusted him to do what he knew was right. It may be risky, but if she wanted her baby to have any chance at life, and if he could see Kakarot in the future as he claimed. Okay, she said quietly. Good. Bardock gave her a quick embrace. Through the overwhelming despair, she was surprised by his show of affection. He seemed to have changed dramatically since the last time she saw him. And she cherished it. All right, we have no time to lose. Meet me tonight at the old ruins out in the wastelands. Sneak Kakarot out of here and I'll have an attack ball there by then. He started for the door. Then Gine realized something. What about Raditz? Or us? She asked him. Bardock stopped and turned to her. He thought for a long moment as if he was unsure. Let's focus on saving Kakarot first, then we'll see what we can do. He turned and left without saying another word. Gine just stood there was for a long time, the weight of the situation sinking in. From just getting from work to here, her life had changed forever. Or at least what little time would be left of it. Kakarot started to flail in her arms, getting her attention. Then, she remembered what she had to do. It's okay, sweetie, she soothed him, then set to the task of trying to smuggle her own son out the building. No one may know what they were up to, but she couldn't let anyone see her take her son home without authorization. He was never meant to be sent home, just sent on his mission. So, she had to be careful. She ran back to the nursery to grab a blanket, wrapping Kakarot up in a bundle. That done, she ran out of the medical complex. Once outside, she weaved her way through a riot in progress to her home, not far from work, but it felt much further away this time. She clutched Kakarot close to her chest to keep his face out of sight and muffle any sounds from him. Gine momentarily panicked, thinking she would arouse the suspicion of bystanders when he started crying. But thankfully, nobody paid her any mind. Everyone was too busy fighting, drowning out the sounds of his crying. Gine finally reached her home. A small dwelling she shared with some coworkers who were still on duty. She set Kakarot down and went through all of her belongings and food storages to get all the supplies she would need to cross the wasteland to where they had to meet. She pushed whatever lingering thoughts she had about her life and that of Bardock and Raditz. Right now, she had to stay calm and focus on the family in front of her that she could save. Later that night, Gine was flying just a few feet off the ground at high speed towards the other side of the world. She was slightly panicking since she took so long to get out of the capital. But she had to be stealthy if Frieza had any ground patrols to keep the Saiyans from wandering off. It had been a long flight out into the wastelands. Even while flying as fast as she could, Vegeta was a large planet with a lot of ground to cover. She brought Kakarot in a sling to carry him while flying with whatever food or water they would need to cross this inhospitable stretch of the globe. In the distance, she spotted the sprawling ruins of the ancient villages that Saiyans used to inhabit so long ago. Mud huts constructed by the first Saiyans who survived their journey from the stars in the resulting war against the Tuffles. Now, the dwellings laid long forgotten. There, she spotted a lone spherical attack ball in the village center where Bardock was waiting for her. She landed in front of him, out of breath from the exertion of energy and the adrenaline of knowing these may be her home world's last moments. You're late, Bardock said urgently with a twinge of annoyance. No, Gine said between gulps of breath. Wasn't sure if I'd stumble across someone looking for us. Plus it's been a while since I had to fly that fast. Right. Forgot you were still too weak to get anywhere in a hurry. He said as if matter-of-factly. She was slightly hurt by his words. Even after all their bonding he was still as prejudiced against her weakness as everyone else. But she pushed that aside, There were bigger things happening now. Then Gine realized something when she looked around. Where's Raditz? She asked, her maternal instincts kicking in. I'm not sure. Bardock answered. I sent a message to him letting him know about Kakarot's departure, but couldn't risk telling him everything if Frieza was listening in. But I haven't seen or heard from him in a while anyways. Last I checked he was still with Prince Vegeta's crew. He may be with him now or somewhere else on the planet. A cold pit opened in Gine's stomach. He couldn't find their eldest son while just about to launch their youngest. Should we at least go look for him? Panic and anger rising in her voice. We don't have time for that. Bardock countered. Frieza could blow this planet up any minute now. We have to at least save Kakarot while we can or else we'll all die. Gine wanted to protest but knew Bardock was right, no matter how powerful her motherly love for her other child was. The planet was far too big to search for Raditz in such a short time, and if they die looking for him then they would have wasted a chance to save at least one of their children. For all they know, if Frieza was truly intent on killing all Saiyans, Raditz may be dead already. It felt like Gine's heart was being ripped out of her chest at that thought. But she couldn't ignore the reality that was happening right now. No matter how horrible this was. No, as wrong as this was, they had no choice but to try and save one of her children while they could. Gine turned downcast as she mentally shoved her despair for Raditz aside and tried to focus on the task at hand. Nothing else mattered now, not if the world was going to end. Is it ready? She gestured towards the pod. Almost, said Bardock without missing a beat, for he too had moved past Raditz's survival. Gine was hurt by his callousness over his own son missing, but now was not the time for dwelling on it. Gine walked towards the open hatch of the pod with Bardock. A holographic screen hovered over the spacecraft's main seat. It was already programmed with a planet for Kakarot. He said, then typed in a few more commands, then the screen showed readouts and coordinates blurring. I didn't want to send him there in case Frieza's men went searching for him, if they go by this particular pod leaving to its pre-programmed destination. He tapped on the screen again, a map of certain star systems for infiltration being displayed. So, I've been searching for other parts of the galaxy to send him to. Somewhere Frieza's forces haven't conquered yet or have no interest in. He tapped the screen again, more sectors popping up but none of them were to Bardock's liking. Gine looked at the star maps. They all formed grids within the 4 quadrants of the spiral galaxy, most of them highlighted in the lower half that marked the extent of the Planet Trade Organization. The fringes of the highlighted areas and blank ones marked where Frieza's forces were focusing on in their conquest or have already taken. All of them were frontline worlds, and Kakarot would be found there immediately, so those were out of the equation. They had to search farther and farther, but there weren't that many to count on even as they zoomed out. Even the most isolated systems at very edge of the galaxy or near the core were no good. They have been extensively mapped and were under consideration by Frieza to see if they are worth taking in order to consolidate his empire's borders. They will certainly detect Kakarot there too and kill him if Frieza was that intent on wiping out all of the Saiyans. Gine then noticed an area on the edge of the map and pointed. Have you tried the northern quadrant? Gine suggested. That's uncharted territory. Bardock replied. Yeah, but that's a lot of empty space to look for a single Saiyan baby. She said, trying to sell her point but fight off the panic of the imminent end of the world. While her point was true, there was still no telling what was out there. The other side of the galaxy was not very well explored, with frontier planets full of surprises that a Saiyan would not want to find themselves in. From dead rocks to poisonous jungle planets that could devour anything, or maybe even a whole other empire hiding in the unknown region that could challenge Frieza. But, given the circumstances, it may be the best place to send Kakarot if they never want him to be found. All right, Bardock said. He zoomed in on a random corner of the fringe of known systems bordering the dark regions that marked unknown space and scrolled farther from there. No. 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 Gine sorted them out, looking for a suitable. That one. She pointed to one planet in particular. Bardock clicked on it, and a short file opened up. Based on what little intel was available, the planet was a small terrestrial world that orbited a yellow star. It literally bordered the edge of scanned systems, for there was nothing north of it added on the map. As far as they could tell, it had no vast quantities of resources to exploit or any advanced industrial capacity to aid Frieza's empire, so there should be no need for him to want to acquire it. If anything, the planet was nothing of interest or value at all, thus, a great place to hide. Most of the planet's surface was covered in oceans of salt water, and its landmasses were a mixture of deserts, rainforests, jungles, mountains, and ice caps. It had very moderate temperatures, so it should be rather pleasant. It had a substantial and diverse ecosystem of primitive lifeforms, plenty to feed Kakarot. Among a multitude of sentient species that evolved on it, only one seemed to be the dominant and somewhat intelligent kind there. A bipedal anthropomorphic type that seemed very biologically similar to Saiyans. They called themselves humans. And based on data that was collected almost 2 centuries prior, they had not yet developed space travel nor energy-based weaponry. They were also extremely weak, save for a few individuals that barely made it to 100 or more in terms of battle power. The planet even had a moon, which would make purging it much easier for Kakarot. Plus, it was a very pretty shade of blue. It's perfect, Gine said after reading aloud all the info on it. Even Bardock had to admit, it was a rather pathetic backwater world in an unknown corner of space. Frieza would have no interest in tearing that region apart just to find him. Alright then, that planet it is, Bardock said as he typed the coordinates into the POD's navigation computer. Then selected a landing site that would be far from any populated areas of these humans. All set now, Bardock said as he stood up. The weight of what was happening returned to Gine in full force. It was time. Slowly, sighing in crushing defeat, Gine held up Kakarot, taking a good long look at him. Well, she started to say but could barely finish as her hands started shaking with Kakarot in them. Quote. I guess this is goodbye, Kakarot. Her voice broke, choking on tears that threatened to fall. This may be the last time she would see any of her children alive. Kakarot could sense his mother's sadness and started to cry as well. Gine, hurry up, Bardock said impatiently. We can't wait any longer. Gine looked up at Bardock and back at her son. He was right, this had to be done. She collected herself and placed Kakarot inside the pod. Now he was really distressed, as if sensing he was about to be sent away from his parents forever into the darkness of space. Seeing her son in that pod by himself, him looking so scared and her knowing what was about to happen, tore Gine from within. This wasn't right. This wasn't fair. Calm down, Kakarot, you are going to be just fine. Bardock tried to reassure his son, but his words had no effect and only made his son cry harder. Bardock groaned in disgust but then turned to Gine. Alright, let's close the pod. Gine heard what he said and looked over to the button on the command console that would seal the pod shut and start the launch procedure. She tried to summon the willpower to press it, but she just couldn't do it. Are you sure we all can't just run away together? Gine asked aloud, hoping that Bardock may have overlooked some detail to not make her do this. She trusted him no matter what, even if he claimed to have precognition. But she still hoped against hope that he could be wrong somehow. It's too risky, Bardock said. They would definitely detect my power on their scouters and shoot us down for sure. He'll have to go alone. Gine looked back down at Kakarot. His cries were now cries of terror. Even though he was just an infant, he knew what was going to happen. His parents were going to die, and he was going to be all alone forever. He was so frightened. Gine almost broke down in tears just standing there, seeing how scared her baby boy was. And she thought of the fate that would await him, something she and Bardock hadn't considered yet. Close the pod door, Bardock commanded, but she wasn't listening. Saiyan babies who were sent on infiltration missions were usually retrieved someday to be reconditioned, and to continue fighting for Frieza. She remembered when Raditz was sent on his first mission as a baby. He came back after a few years purging the planet he was sent to. She barely recognized him, and he didn't recognize her at all since he had been by himself on a killing spree for so long. He almost tried to kill her and anyone that came near him since he was so feral and uncontrollable, but the doctors were able to sedate him and reprogram his mind to fit back into Saiyan society. He regained his sanity and became a proper warrior instead of some kill-crazy lunatic. The torment he must have gone through broke her heart, but she was so proud of him that he made it through it all and came out stronger. But now, with Frieza out to kill all Saiyans, he might try to track Kakarot down. Even if he never did find him, Kakarot would have no one to report back to. Nor will he have someone to pick him up. Kakarot would be stranded on that frontier planet once he's destroyed all native life on it. He won't have either of his parents or his brother to look after him, or even any humans to keep as pets. It's possible that he may adapt to that planet's culture and become one of them, but she doubted that would happen, for the time he spent in his incubator made sure that he would fulfill his programming. He would spend the rest of his life all alone on a ruined and forgotten planet, with only whatever wildlife he spared for food to keep him alive. He would know nothing but killing and surviving. No different than a wild animal. No one deserved that fate, least of all her own child. I said close it, damn it. Bardock yelled angrily. When Gine didn't react, he reached over to press the button himself. But then Gine grabbed Bardock's hand before he could push the launch command. Let me go with him, she demanded. Bardock paused for a moment. His anger at her stopping him was replaced with shock at what she said. What? He asked incredulously. I said let me go with him. Gine looked at Bardock with determination. Gine, are you crazy? I told you that we can't go. We don't have any more time to argue. Bardock nearly shouted back at her. Yes we do, she said, putting herself between Bardock and the pod. He'll die out there if we send him away by himself. And if Kakarot makes it to that planet and Frieza doesn't go after him, he'll be all alone for the rest of his days. If I go with him, I could at least be around to look after him. Didn't you hear me? Bardock answered back hotly. Frieza's men will detect you too if you launch together. It won't do him any good. Maybe it will. Gine shouted back. This took Bardock by surprise. Kakarot is extremely weak. You know this. I'm weak too. You said so yourself. She pointed an accusatory finger at him. The inspiration came to her as she explained her plan to Bardock. She was too caught up on going with Kakarot to know how, but it made sense as she spoke. So, with both him and I in the same pod, don't you think it wouldn't make much of a difference if they detect 2 weak Saiyans instead of just one? Bardock tried to speak but stopped. Like he seemed to understand, then spoke up. It won't work. They'll see you for sure and blow you out of the sky. It's too big of a chance. I know, Gine admitted, for it was a very big chance. They didn't have a scouter to see what her power level was now. Bardock left his behind since he didn't want anyone to listen in on what they were doing. But last time she checked it may have been 440, before Kakarot was born. It was pathetic for a full-grown adult Saiyan, but still detectable on any scouter. And if she got a power boost from childbirth, which could have put her up to 500, they'll see them for sure. But we are already taking a chance as it is to save Kakarot. At least this way, 2 of us could be saved. And he will never have to spend the rest of his life all by himself on some godforsaken rock in the middle of nowhere. Gine held Bardock's hand gently as she looked pleadingly into his hardened eyes. I would be there for him. To tell him about us, about you, Raditz, our race, Frieza, everything. She looked back at Kakarot still wailing in the pod, then back to Bardock, her eyes glistening with tears. I will get to be his mother. He deserves that. Bardock was silent for what felt like an eternity to Gine. She knew that he was basically deciding her fate along with their son, and that didn't sit well with her. Even if she was a sorry excuse of a Saiyan, she should at least be able to have a say in how she lived or died if this was indeed going to be their last day on their world. And despite the risk, Gine knew deep down that she was right. Her baby deserved a chance for a better life far away from Frieza, and she could give him that by going where he went, to give him guidance and protection, like any real mother would. Then what of the inhabitants of this planet? Bardock asked. You intend to kill them all off with him or make them your pets? Should be weak enough even for you. Gine almost laughed, taking it as a good sign. Even near the end of the world he was still taking any potshot he could at her lack of strength, but she felt that Bardock was almost convinced. Maybe, but at least he won't have to be so alone. She just said. Gine honestly had no intentions to kill those poor creatures unless it was for her survival and for Kakarot's. But she wouldn't say that out loud, just enough to make Bardock happy. He looked at her, then at Kakarot for a long, long moment. Then, finally, Bardock sighed as he relented. All right. Gine leapt at him before he knew it, wrapping her arms around him and nearly choking him. Hot tears of joy and sadness fell down her cheeks. Thank you, she said softly. Bardock held her by the waist and brought her back down. But you better get going now. We've wasted enough time as it is. Gine nodded in agreement and collected herself. She feared that if she hesitated now, she won't be able to do what she intended to do. In a swift motion, she picked up Kakarot into her arms and took a seat inside the pod instead. Kakarot suddenly calmed down, so happy to be in his mother's embrace. As she strapped herself in, Bardock spoke up. I will go face Frieza right after you launch, hopefully I can distract him enough to allow you two to escape. Who knows, I may even get lucky and land a hit on him. Besides, we Saiyans will not go quietly. He said with an ounce of pride. Gine looked at him with awe. How a low-class warrior like him would go on to challenge the galactic tyrant himself. Even in the face of certain death, Bardock showed no fear. Not even King Vegeta himself showed that kind of courage against incredible odds. She remembered then why she fell for Bardock. If you do, Gine said, you know where to find us. And find Raditz if you can. We will be together again. Sadness returning to her at the mention of her eldest. Oh, she dearly wished she could have seen him one last time. If he was still alive. Don't worry, we will. Bardock assured. So many impossible promises were being made already, Gine thought morbidly. But no matter what, in death or on a far-flung world, they will all be reunited as a family again. Someday. Goodbye, Bardock, Gine said, her voice breaking again. He nodded solemnly. Goodbye, Gine. He then looked down at Kakarot, now looking up at him calmly. And goodbye to you too, my son. Bardock reached over and pressed the launch button. The pod came to life and the door closed. It locked with a hiss as she and Kakarot were sealed away from the outside world. Gine pressed a hand against the glass window. She may never see Bardock again, so she took her last chance at what she had to say. I love you, she said, tears falling down her face. He heard her through the glass, and Bardock simply smiled back at her. I know. He didn't explicitly say he loved her back, but it was as close to it as a Saiyan could, and she'll take it. A light began beeping on the pod's control panel, signaling it was ready for takeoff. She felt the engines come on as the pod lifted slowly off the ground, then stopped, floating in the air momentarily. She never broke eye contact with Bardock as he watched. Then, without much warning to brace herself, the ground receded away with blinding speed. The sudden acceleration made Gine's vision tunnel for a moment. She never got a last glimpse of Bardock before he became too distant to see. Her vision cleared when the pod's artificial gravity kicked in, nulling the acceleration on her body. Kakarot cried again, from the unpleasant takeoff. Already they were in space. Planet Vegeta was a brilliant magenta sphere in front of her through the window. It was receding fast, far enough to see it in its entirety after a minute into the flight. Gine spotted Frieza's ship on the other side of the planet, hovering in place in high orbit. She wondered if they spotted them. Then, she saw specks appearing around the ship, and they were moving. Her heart suddenly became a lead weight. They had been spotted. She had doomed herself and her son. They didn't move after them though, they just stayed near Frieza's ship. Weren't they going to at least send attack squads or fire lasers at them? Planet Vegeta got smaller and smaller as they get farther and farther. But nothing happened. They were still in one piece. Did they make it? Did she dare hope that this was all a false alarm? After a while, Planet Vegeta became far enough away that it was a pinprick of light outshone by its parent star, indiscernible from all the other stars that made up the infinite sea of outer space. A high-pitched beep and rushing hiss of gas indicated that the pod's stasis mode was activated. Kakarot's crying ceased when he was induced into sleep for the long journey to their destination. Gine felt her mind slipping. She fought to stay awake and keep an eye on. She suddenly saw a bright flash where planet Vegeta ought to be, as if it had become their star system's second sun. Something within her felt torn away, sensing Bardock's life force through their bond disappear. He had failed, and he, along with their entire race, and her home, was gone. Those were Gine's last coherent thoughts before everything faded away into sweet oblivion. Chapter 1. Earth. Blackness. A shudder went through her, but Gine didn't stir. Then came a noise, a beeping sound that grew louder and louder. She was dreaming about something, but the beeping kept interrupting. Gine woke with a start, jolting upright in her seat. Her mind felt foggy, having completely forgotten the dream she had just moments ago. In her lap she saw an infant cradled in her limp arms. Was it her son? She couldn't remember his name. Kakarot. She tried to recall. Yes, she remembered. Yes, he was. His name was Kakarot. Clinging on to that detail in her mind, Gine looked around. She saw that she was inside of a space pod. The incessant beeping came from a blinking red light on the control panel. It indicated that the craft had arrived at its pre-programmed destination. The engines were not running, and outside the viewport was a blinding light. She looked out to see that they were sitting inside a crater the pod had made from landing. She wondered for a moment why she was even there. Gine had always hated these first few minutes coming out of induced hibernation, no matter how much she got used to it in the Frieza Force. But the fog in her mind slowly cleared as the pod's stasis mode went through the deactivation process. After a few more moments, all of her memories came rushing back to her. Those of Bardock, of having to save Kakarot, their planet's impending doom at the hands of Frieza, all of it at once as she fully came to. Then she remembered the last thing she saw before falling asleep, the bright light of her home planet exploding against the dark expanse. Planet Vegeta was gone. Bardock was dead. All of her friends, her comrades, her entire species and everyone she ever knew. All gone. Destroyed by Frieza. And she watched it all while trying to save her youngest son. Gine sat there in the pod for a long while, trying to let everything that had happened sink in. She had no idea how long she and Kakarot had been asleep. Months probably. But the memories were as clear as they had relatively just happened to her only moments ago, before the hibernation that reduced their travel time took over. Kakarot woke up too. His yawning and cooing broke her out of her staring into nothingness. She looked down at him and he looked back. She remembered now that she was here because of him. She wanted to save him from Frieza, and she chose to go with him. Sadness and joy washed over her simultaneously. We made it, Gine said to herself quietly. They were still alive. Somehow, they had escaped from their world's destruction undetected, and judging by what she could see outside the pod, they had made it to the frontier planet she had selected. She wished that Bardock could see them, wherever he was now. Gine shook her head. There will be more time to reflect later. Now she had to assess where they landed and see this far-flung rock that would be their new home. She pushed the blinking light on the control panel. An ear-piercing hissing sound filled the inside of the pod as the airtight hatch unsealed and slowly opened outward. Cool fresh air and bright sunlight flooded the pod. She squinted and waited for her eyes to adjust. Once she could see, Gine gathered Kakarot in her arms and stood up, and accidentally went flying out of the pod. Whoa! She cried out in alarm, nearly face-planting into the dirt, but she managed to land on her knees and with her free hand, clutching Kakarot protectively in the other. Recovering her wits, Gine tried to stand up again, moving more slowly. As she did so, Gine wobbled unsteadily and flailed her free hand trying to balance herself. She felt so light on her feet that she worried of being blown away by the slightest breeze. Her baby Kakarot just stared up quizzically at her, fumbling around. This weak gravity, Gine realized. She judged it was probably 1/10 of that of planet Vegeta's. It was definitely going to take some getting used to. Once she felt steady enough on her feet again, Gine very gingerly walked up and out of the crater. She then took in her surroundings and immediately felt lost in wonder. It seemed like they landed in a dense forest of tall, pointed trees of a shade of green she had never seen before. Above the tree line, she saw white-capped mountains that towered over them. And above that, the sky was a deep blue that made Gine feel so small against this vast wilderness. The sun hung high overhead, its heat and light felt comfortably warm against her skin. Gine had never taken such a liking to a planet so quickly. It looked so pleasant. More than that, it was beautiful. A far cry from the rugged and barren planet Vegeta, with the unforgiving heat from its red sun and orange sky she had been so used to her whole life. Here, the light of this world's yellow star was bright, vibrant, and brought out such a sea of colors in everything around her that it almost hurt her eyes. But it was too enticing to look away either. This green forest against the white mountain and blue sky was far prettier than any landscape Gine had ever seen from the many planets she had been to. The air was alive with the sounds of wildlife everywhere too. Her Saiyan sense of smell picked up the moist and very fresh, sharp, and earthy scents of the forest. The cold and crisp air of the atmosphere she breathed into her lungs felt so rejuvenating it made her feel like a newborn breathing air for the first time, and the sounds of abundant animals around her meant lots of fresh food to hunt. Gine closed her eyes for a moment, lost in a surprising moment of bliss this environment gave her. No planet she had ever set foot on looked and felt this peaceful. She counted her lucky stars that she picked in an interesting planet that turned out to be a hidden oasis. Her ear perked up and her body stiffened. Her super-sensitive hearing picked up twigs snapping under footfalls. Something was approaching from within in the woods. She didn't have a scouter to identify what was coming towards them, or if it posed a threat. Moving fast, Gine leapt into the nearest tree to hide. She temporarily forgot the low gravity and nearly overshot it. Cursing, she lowered herself and Kakarot back into the brush. She adjusted herself to see where the sound was coming from, now getting louder. Kakarot fidgeted and whined, but Gine pressed a finger to his mouth to shush him. Through the cover, she saw a bipedal creature appear out of the thick brush. A human. Must have been. It looked almost exactly like a Saiyan except she couldn't see a tail. It looked to be an elderly male, judging from the gray bushy mustache and the wrinkles on his face. He wore a sort of orange tunic, a fuzzball-tipped cap on his bald head, and a red pole on his back. From afar, he moved slowly but carried an air of ease with him that seemed to make him appear harmless. The human was checking out the crater, looking amazed at seeing the pod in its center. He then looked towards her direction, staring curiously at where they were. He then started walking toward them. Gine felt panic rising in her. Did he see me? She looked down to make sure Kakarot would stay quiet, but then saw his tail hanging out below. Oh no, he could see his tail. It was too late now. The human was right under them, with his red pole out. Was it a weapon? She reached down to pull up Kakarot's tail when the human started to poke at it. He poked at it too hard though, and Kakarot cried out in pain. So shocked she was by his cries that Gine lost her balance. In this weak gravity she thus leaned too far trying to correct herself, losing her grip and fell out of the tree. She hit the ground with a thud. Kakarot landed on top of her, but the weak gravity luckily cushioned his fall. Oh my! The elderly human yelped as he jumped back in surprise. Gine immediately righted herself up, facing the interloper with baby Kakarot in a deathly tight grip in one arm. The old man, now seeing what fell out of the tree in full view, looked at a loss for words. But seeing how wild-eyed Gine looked, he tensed up into a stance as if preparing to fight. Even though she had been away from battle for a long time, as a Saiyan she could tell this human meant business. She had to fight. No matter how much she hated to or how harmless this human looked, she had her baby boy to protect. Gine launched herself at the human. With this low gravity she was incredibly fast but was still trying to control her balance. He then simply moved out of the way. With nothing to stop her momentum, she slammed face first into the soft soil and grass. Instinctively she held Kakarot close to her chest to protect him from the impact. The loose soil hurt her Saiyan body little, and she skidded to a stop without a scratch on her. Gine got back up. She was a little filthy from plowing herself into the dirt, and Kakarot was covered in it too, but they were both unharmed. Turning back around growling, she tried for another run at the human. Gine threw a punch, but he gracefully dodged it. Then she threw kick after kick, still not hitting him. Getting angry, she went after him in a flurry of punches and kicks, but the human kept evading her attacks. He was making a serious effort though, trying to stay ahead of her movements. She was much faster than him, but she was still unused to the gravity and out of practice with hand-to-hand combat. Out of luck, one of her strikes connected to him in the chest. He howled as he was sent hurtling away. He skidded to a stop several yards across from the crater, stunned and clutching himself in pain. Glad she was finally able to land a blow on him, Gine leapt into the air. She would end this quickly by driving herself straight down towards where he landed and squash him. She jumped too high though, as she, again, didn't take the low gravity into account for her attack. In the time it took for her to stop midair and plunge towards the human, he had recovered enough to flip out of the way at the last possible moment. Gine slammed into the ground, half burying her legs and sending rocks and debris outwards from the impact. The human put some distance between him and Gine. He reached behind his back and pulled out the red pole. Gine jumped out of the hole she made and tried to face him again when power pole extend. All the wind was knocked out of Gine as something gut punched her, doubling her over and sent her crashing into a tree behind her. It made a sharp cracking sound as it snapped and bent easily beneath her back. Trying to regain her focus after being stunned, she saw to her amazement that the red pole was now several yards long and pinned her in the stomach. How did he do that? She grabbed the pole with her free hand and shoved it aside. With the force she used, it shattered a row of trees next to her, some of them falling in pieces and others not quite destroyed, bent over from having their trunks cracked. The mass of shattered trees next to Gine fell right on top of her. She instinctively raised both hands and released a blast of energy that filled the air with a rush of heat as the trees were vaporized into ashes. It was then that she realized both her hands were empty. Where was Kakarot? The crying from her left told her where. He was laying on the ground in his bundle, flailing helplessly. Her heart almost stopped. She was so caught by surprise by being hit with the red pole that she didn't notice that she dropped him. One of the trees that was leaning over from being hit by the red pole snapped in two and started to fall on top of him. No! She screamed in horror as she took a flying leap towards him. She scooped him up just before the tree crushed him, skidded on her feet then fell over. Kakarot cried in her arms, hurt by her desperate clutching. Gine looked back at the old man. He hadn't made a move against her yet. He just stood there, his face now an expression of concern. Was he worried about himself? Or was he concerned for her and Kakarot? Either way, she couldn't fight him. She had been out of battle for too long, and this human proved to be a rather formidable opponent. With this weak gravity shield just be tossed around, and if she failed, Kakarot would be left defenseless. It was better to get away than fight, Gine decided. With her free hand she fired a ki blast at the human's feet. He didn't have time to react when he saw the attack coming and the resulting explosion sent him flying back. Taking this opening, Gine made a dash into the tree line. She ran as fast as she could, jumping over logs, brushing through bushes, and scraping past branches so quickly they left scratches. After a few minutes, Gine slowed her pace and looked behind her. She couldn't see any trace of the old man following her. She stopped running, panting from the adrenaline rush. When her heart slowed down enough, she sighed in relief. They were safe for the time being. But Kakarot was still crying. Shish, it's okay, it's okay. You're safe now, sweetie. She gently cooed. His cries subsided slightly but didn't stop. Then she heard a little rumble coming from him. Oh, she heard herself say. He was hungry. Come to think of it, she was hungry too. After being in stasis for who knew how long, their bodies desperately needed sustenance. Worry took hold of Gine again, as the problem of protecting Kakarot from that human was now replaced with having to keep him alive. She looked up through the canopy of treetops, and noticed it was getting darker. The sun was lower to the horizon, and the deep blue of the sky was replaced with shades of pink and purple that would have made Gine stop where she was to admire it. But she couldn't. She had to find something to eat soon. By nightfall, she didn't have much luck. Gine had found a somewhat safe location in an open space of the forest where Kakarot would be out of reach from predators. She got a small fire going with logs she collected and sat against a rock with Kakarot in her arms. It was completely dark, save for the warm glow the crackling campfire provided them and the starlight above. She still hadn't found any food. The creatures of the woods had gone into hiding, probably from her since they were spooked by a Saiyan in their habitat. So far all she could do was find some non-poisonous plants for Kakarot to chew on. It should calm him down enough for now, but they still needed to find something real to live off of. She couldn't risk going back to the pod to see if there was anything they could use from it, since she was worried that human might still be there salvaging it instead, or if he went to alert more of his kind to her presence. She wished that this planet's moon was out in full right now so they could just stomp everything in sight to make this place safe, but they couldn't. She was not sure when the next full moon would occur, or how often it did. For now, they were defenseless. Gine looked up into the night sky. There were so many stars out. They looked very different from the familiar constellations back home. She wondered where planet Vegeta's star system was among them. Where it used to be. She was abruptly reminded. Her eyes started glistening with that thought. Bardock. He was gone. And every other Saiyan was gone too, and maybe even Raditz too. Killed by Frieza. She still didn't know why. How could he betray allies who've been nothing but loyal to him for most of their history? Now she and Kakarot may be the last Saiyans left in existence. And they were trapped all alone on this godforsaken rock. Kakarot started to whimper too as he felt his hunger overtake him. Gine held him tightly to her chest, rocking him back and forth to try and comfort him. Her stomach started to rumble too. All alone and starving, she thought. The weight of the situation finally starting to crush her. Deep in her mind, although she tried to suppress it, she was starting to regret coming here. With what little time she and Bardock had to make this escape work, she was so caught up in coming along with Kakarot that she hadn't thought through how she would survive with her son on a planet they knew nothing about. And here they were, starving and hiding from the inhabitants. She was so angry at herself for not being able to fight off an old man. Was she really that weak and useless? And Kakarot, he was far weaker than that. If he was left to fend for himself, he never would have had a chance here. Tears streaked down her cheeks and landed on Kakarot. Now they were both crying together. Maybe it would have been better if they had stayed on planet Vegeta. At least they would have died with Bardock and Raditz. All of them going together as a family, not separated by light years, and her not so alone, cold, lost, and hungry. She sniffled, letting herself get lost in her despair. Then stopped. Gine sniffed again. Through her tears and the campfire smoke she noticed there was another scent in the air. Food. Her extremely sensitive Saiyan sense of smell picked up something that smelled cooked coming from somewhere. And it smelled delicious too. She quickly stood up with Kakarot and looked towards where the scent was coming from. It seemed like it was coming from the direction of the tallest mountain in the distance. Whatever it was, it brought hope to her. Maybe they won't starve after all. Gine took off into the forest, following the scent through the brush and up the slope. She picked up the pace, the growling in her stomach becoming almost painful. The scent was getting stronger as they got closer, giving her strength. When they got to a clearing, she stopped. She saw what looked like a wooden dwelling with curved roofs on all four sides. The scent was very strong now, it had to be coming from inside the hut. Her mouth started watering. Kakarot could smell the food too as he started to flail his arms out, as if trying to reach it. Oh gods, whatever was cooking in there, it smelled so good. Then she froze. Through the elegantly carved window Gine could see someone moving inside, setting out bowls of something onto a low table. Dismay gripped her when she recognized him as the elderly human she encountered earlier. How would she steal food from someone who could beat her? Gine considered retreating back into the forest, but she couldn't. Her feet were anchored and could only go forward, her body going towards the scent of something that could save them. She had been without food for too long. And what was true of all Saiyans is that no matter the danger, if they were starving, they will eat something come hell or high water. Her stomach began to take over from her brain as she rushed towards the front door of the hut. There was no way she may find better food in the forest that smelled so nourishing. She didn't care about fighting the human now. Without thinking, she charged through the wooden door. It shattered into a shower of splinters that flew everywhere. Where's the food? She screamed. The elderly human fell back from his spot at the low table, startled out of his wits. When he sat back up and saw who crashed through his front door, he tensed up. And his eyes lit up in recognizing her. They stared at each other for a long tense moment. With how disheveled she was from running through the forest and the crazed look in her eyes induced from hunger, Gine seemed feral. Anyone being confronted by her ought to scream bloody murder and run. And they ought to, as she was ready to throttle this human. But then the old man didn't. Instead, his gaze drifted to baby Kakarot in arms. Then he relaxed and gave her a disarming smile. Please, come in, he said, calmly gesturing her to enter. Gine was flabbergasted that this human didn't start immediately attacking her. Was this some sort of trick? She started backing away, readying to make another run for it. But the old man raised both hands reassuringly. It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you. Then he waved his hand over to the contents on the table. You must be famished. Please, come sit down and have something to eat. Gine followed his gesture and saw what was on his table. Her eyes widened at what she had to admit was the greatest sight she had seen all day. The elderly human had cooked up a feast. Multiple bowls of white spheres of something grainy, grilled fish, vegetables, soup, loaves of bread, noodles, beans, pickled eggs, and other assortments of food she had no idea what they were, but gods be damned they looked so tantalizing. Without thinking, Gine made her way over and knelt down at the wooden table with Kakarot on her lap. Before the human could say anything else, a flurry of hands and stray food went flying as she and Kakarot greedily inhaled everything within reach. The bowls of white spheres immediately gone, half the bread in one bite, the fish devoured, and eggs eaten whole. After a few minutes, she and Kakarot slowed to a stop, catching their breath. Then resumed again to finish off everything else on the table that wasn't already devoured. The elderly human watched in surprise by just how much and how fast they ate. He looked slightly put off by their lack of table manners. But they were too hungry to care. Soon, baby Kakarot stopped for the last time and fell asleep in Gine's lap while she finished off some soup and chugged a glass of water in the same gulp. Everything on the table that could have been eaten was gone. The human did manage to sneak a bite of some white spheres and fish before they disappeared, but he looked glad somehow, like he was at a speed that she and her baby had their fill. Gine sat there for a long moment, savoring the lingering taste of everything she ate, and the fullness of her belly. There was nothing on planet Vegeta that could remotely compare to the sweet and filling pieces of joy she just ate. Bar none. That was the best food I've ever tasted. Gine thought aloud, her smile lighting up her face. The old man chuckled. Haha, well, I'm very pleased you enjoyed it. He said warmly, it's not often I have a guest to give me a second opinion on my cooking. Gine looked down at Kakarot sound asleep in her lap, looking as satisfied as she was from such a hearty meal. She ruffled his hair and looked up to the old man. Thank you so much, she said, meaning every word. He beamed back at her. You are most welcome, my dear. You clearly needed it more than I did. The old man gathered the plates and went to set them in a wash basin as he spoke over his shoulder. Now, if you don't mind me asking, what's a young woman like yourself doing wandering out in the woods with a baby? Gine clung Kakarot to her a little tighter at the old man's question. She wasn't sure if she could trust this human, remembering how he easily tossed her around earlier. But he did invite her into his home, even after their hostile encounter. He even let her eat his dinner without question so far. So, she reasoned that he might not have intentions of harming them. She relaxed a little and stared into the wooden spirals of the table as she answered. Well, it's a long story, and, you probably won't believe me if I tell you. The elderly human came back to the table, holding 2 empty cups and a steaming kettle in his hands. I'll be the judge of that. Although, he poured hot tea into the cups as he spoke. Would your story have anything to do with that strange metal sphere that fell from the sky? Where we had our little scuffle? He offered Gine one of the cups. She gratefully accepted it and took a slow sip. The tea was very hot, but that mattered little to her Saiyan tongue. Plus, it tasted simply exquisite. She took more gulps of it. The warmth it gave her in her belly was already helping calm her nerves. She finished her cup and sighed in delight as she answered, as a matter of fact, it does. Is that so? The old man's eyebrows rose in surprise as he sat down across the table from her. Gine nodded. Well then, I guess you have quite a tale to tell. He remarked. Why don't you start with who you are? The old man realized something and gently slapped himself in the head. Oh, pardon me. Where are my manners? We haven't even introduced. He extended an open hand to her. My name is Gohan, son Gohan. She looked at his outstretched hand and took it in her own. She guessed handshakes truly were a universal greeting. Hello, Gohan. I'm Gine. A lovely name. Nice to meet you, Gine, said Gohan. His gentle smile under that bushy mustache somehow made her feel safe in his presence. Gohan then pointed towards Kakarot in her lap, who was now starting to stir awake again. And who is this little one? Gine ruffled Kakarot's hair. This is my son, Kakarot. Gohan smiled at the boy when he looked at him. Hello, little Kakarot. Kakarot giggled back at him. I think he likes you. Gine said with a smile. Kakarot always cried around strangers, afraid of everyone except his mother. But if her little boy felt safe enough with this old man, then she was too. Seems like he does. Gohan answered back with a smile, then focused on her again. Well then, Gine, how about you tell me where you two came from? Gine took a deep breath and exhaled. Well, you see. Over the course of the evening, she carefully explained to Gohan everything. That the metal sphere he saw was her spaceship, that she and her son were from another planet named Vegeta. That they were part of a warrior race called Saiyans who worked for the Galactic Emperor Frieza, who had them conquer planets in his name. She explained the Saiyans' ability to change into great apes when they looked at the full moon, how Saiyan babies were used to purge all life on whatever planet they landed on, and the different classes of Saiyan warriors. Then she recounted how one day Frieza inexplicably turned against the Saiyans and destroyed their planet. Her and Kakarot's escaped to this planet with the help of Kakarot's father, and how she and her youngest son may be the only survivors. It was really difficult for her to tell Gohan about Bardock and Raditz without choking up, but she did her best. Gohan just sat there and listened, looking more mesmerized as the tale went on. By the time she was finished, his tea had gotten cold. You're from outer space, was all he could say, his voice quiet and filled with awe. Gine nodded. Yes. Gohan sat there in utter amazement. He looked at her like he had never truly saw her before. He probably never imagined that literal aliens would show up on his doorstep today, Gine thought dryly. Well, I guess that explains the strange outfits you're wearing. And he gingerly pointed towards her and Kakarot's furry appendages, tails. Gine let her tail flap around a bit so he could see, then wrapped it again around her waist. But you are not here to conquer our planet, are you? Gohan asked pensively. As much as the idea of beings from other worlds fascinated him, the idea that they were also extremely powerful and quite genocidal horrified him. Gine looked at him and shook her head vehemently. Absolutely not. We just came here to escape from Frieza. She looked down and stroked Kakarot's hair. I have no interest in purging planets. I'm not like other Saiyans. Gohan, while seeming to not have judged her to be the bloodthirsty kind of Saiyan she described her race as, couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Then he asked, and, this tyrant, this, Frieza, fellow, he does not know you're here on Earth. And he won't come looking for you. Gine looked at him quizzically. Earth. Yes. That is the name of our planet here. Planet Earth, answered Gohan. Oh, said Gine, looking down in thought. Earth. She rolled the name off of her tongue. Sounds like a nice name for such pretty planet. But, isn't your planet mostly covered in water? Why would it be named after dirt if it's mostly ocean? Gohan thought for a moment as if the idea never occurred to him, then shrugged. Beats me. But I don't think anybody knows. Huh, was all Gine said, but she shoved that train of thought aside. But to answer your question, no. I don't believe Frieza knows we are here. We made sure of it. I chose this planet because it was unknown. Really? Asked an intrigued Gohan. Gine nodded. Yes. This world lies at the fringe of explored space, as far from Frieza's empire as we could go without getting lost. There was no name for this planet in any record of the worlds we mapped throughout the galaxy. And I don't think Frieza or anyone in the Planet Trade Organization would have any interest in this planet at all. It's too primitive and not rich in resources. She then added, no offense intended. Huh. Well, none taken I suppose. Said Gohan plainly. Then asked, so, you mentioned that you are not like other Saiyans. How so? Gine looked away, feeling uncertain and ashamed as she spoke. I'm not a warrior like them. I mean, I was, but I'm not strong and I don't like killing. But I have helped purge planets before. I never enjoyed a moment of it, unlike how other Saiyans do, or did. But, I was forced to partake in conquest and bloodshed, and I hate myself for it. Back on planet Vegeta, it would have been social suicide if she ever said openly what she just said. Despite being in an environment where she was free to speak how she pleased, this was still very difficult for her to even talk about. As Saiyans, she continued, her voice hollow. We believe we're destined to be the strongest warriors in the universe. It is part of who we are, and we were taught how to kill from birth. Gine remembered when she was sent out on her first assignment as an infiltration baby, and the planets she helped subjugate afterwards before she was kicked out of the service. She prided herself for surviving the purging missions, but she loathed herself to this day for bringing so much pain and suffering on countless innocent people. She would never have done any of it if given the choice. She looked down, her eyes started to water again. But, I was never cut out to be a true Saiyan warrior, but then again, I never really wanted to. I don't want to kill, even if I had to. And that makes me weak. Makes Kakarot weak too. She chuckled morbidly. Must have gotten it from me. Gohan was silent, and Gine wondered what he was thinking. How does one even react to being told that the person you were sitting across from was responsible for the destruction of entire worlds? She looked back up at him. If our last fight was any indication, I don't think I would have been able to conquer this planet anyway. But when we were escaping, I didn't think that far ahead. So, I guess we'd have just lived here peacefully. I see. Gohan finally said and sat there for a long time before speaking again. Well, if I may say so, I wouldn't call you weak. Gine's eyes widened. Really? Really? In fact, you are probably the strongest fighter I've ever come across, and I've met many of the best warriors there ever were in the world. He said with earnestness. A bit sloppy in technique and instinct maybe, but you have an incredible right hook for sure. Gine was astonished. It was probably the first compliment she had ever received for her fighting ability. She really didn't know how to accept it, but she remembered their fight from earlier. It was then that she noticed that Gohan had a slight wince when he mimicked the punch to the chest he mentioned she gave. She suddenly felt a wave of guilt. I'm sorry if I hurt you. Gine said, too ashamed to look at him. Gohan waved his hand dismissively. Oh my dear, please, don't worry about that. That's long in the past, and I've been hurt much worse. Gine looked up at him with sad eyes. You are too forgiving. Even after I tried to kill you, and after telling you that I had done terrible things before. Gohan's expression softened. Gine, I can spot an evil soul from a mile away. You are most certainly not an evil person. Based on all the things you told me about where you came from and the circumstances which you were born into, I have no right to cast judgment on you. Besides, if you feel guilt for the things you have done, then you have a conscience, and know right from wrong. No evil soul would dwell on such things. Right. Gine did not feel convinced by his words. The worlds she helped conquer and the pain she inflicted still happened and could not be undone. No words of comfort could ever fix that. But, his words did touch something within her. On some level, she felt an understanding from Gohan that she had never before felt. To be able to lay bare her true feelings to someone who would not laugh or spit on her but give her an honest and non-judgmental validation of what she believed in, that conquering worlds was wrong, was truly amazing to her. Not even Bardock understood her to such a level like this and often mocked her for it as any other Saiyan would. She sat there in silence as a tear fell down her cheek, feeling as if she had been heard for the first time in her life. I guess so, she said softly. Gohan continued. And don't feel bad about you hurting me, dear. You were a scared and desperate mother just trying to protect your baby, and after everything you've been through recently, I don't think you were in much of a position to make clear decisions. A slow smile crept on her face, relieved to hear that he held nothing against her for what she did, even if she felt she didn't deserve it. Gine didn't know why, but there was something about Gohan in his grace and wisdom that made her feel safe not just in his presence, but safe to her core. And Gohan turned solemn, gently placing a hand on top of hers. You have my condolences for everything you have lost. Gine sat there and tried to digest his consolation as it all hit her again. The father of her children, her eldest boy, everything and everyone she had ever known. Her home. She realized Gohan was the first person she had told of her home world's destruction to. It was weird that for such an unfathomable loss, she wasn't even sure how she could process it. But sadness overtook her, and she struggled to find the words to say. I appreciate that, Gine said as she tried to wipe away her tears. Gohan handed her a napkin which she gratefully accepted, feeling ridiculous for being vulnerable in front of a practical stranger. Gohan sipped his tea and realized it was cold. He then noticed that the kettle had gotten cold too. They must have talked long into the night. Well, Gine, since you have just landed here, I can assume you don't have a safe place to sleep yet. He asked. Gine looked at him. A twinge of fear crept into her as she thought if he was going to force them to leave. Slowly, she shook her head as a no. Very well. You can stay here then. He said simply. Gine's head shot up at his answer. Really? Absolutely, my dear. You must be in great need of some proper rest after such a long journey, so why don't you and Kakarot feel free to make yourselves at home? Gine sat there stunned. This man, this total stranger whom she almost killed, had just not only fed them but also willingly offered shelter to her and Kakarot. Could someone really be this kind? You'd do that for us? She stammered, still in disbelief. Of course. Gohan repeated. You can stay here for as long as you like, so you can get your bearings on how to live like the rest of us Earthlings. He gestured with both arms taking in the space of his humble abode. The place is a bit small, but it is quiet and comfortable, and I wouldn't mind some company anyway. Gohan said smiling. Gine was speechless. But, why would you do this for us? She asked, her voice soft and uncomprehending. Because it's the right thing to do. He said simply, as if understanding her not knowing what to say. You two are refugees who fled for your lives and have nowhere else to go. Here, you and your son will have a chance to live free. I cannot in good conscience turn you away. Gine could only look at Gohan with her vision flooding. She was too bewildered and touched by the pure generosity of this soul to take them under his roof. Only a few hours ago Gine thought she and Kakarot were resigned to die alone and afraid in a wilderness they were too weak to survive in. And yet this human they happened to come across had practically saved them. All her apprehensions gone, Gine got up and walked over to Gohan. She embraced him as tight as she could without crushing him, wanting to convey just how much she felt indebted to him. Thank you, Gohan, she whispered, her voice cracking. Gohan stood there and kindly patted her on the back. You're welcome, Gine, he said, his voice filled with warmth. After a long moment, Gine let go of Gohan and took a shuddering breath. Is there anything I can do for all you've done? She asked sincerely. You don't need to do anything for me, as long as I know you and Kakarot are safe, that's all that matters. Gohan said. He looked past Gine and noticed that the remnants of the door she kicked in, then an idea clicked. But maybe, you could help me fix the door. He pointed. Gine looked behind her and saw the shattered door. Oh, of course. Hey, I broke it, so I'll fix it for you. She said, scratching the back of her head in embarrassment. Oh, and I can cook too. She said with pride. I was a line cook on my home planet, so I can make you a feast to pay you back for the delicious meal you just gave us. Excellent. Gohan beamed. You can do that too if you like, but let's worry about all that in the morning. I think you two should get some sleep first. He said when he and Gine saw Kakarot yawning uncontrollably. Sounds like a good idea. She agreed. Then I'll go grab myself a pillow and blanket so you two can have the bed tonight. Gine smiled and said another heartfelt, "Thank you," as Gohan went off to grab what he needed. Gine picked up Kakarot, who was now almost fast asleep. She looked out the window to the night sky, then back down at Kakarot, and remembered something. When is the next full moon? She asked. Gohan was taken aback by her seemingly random query, but he answered, "About 15 days from now. Why?" "Okay," she said, then continued, "It's just that we need to make sure that Kakarot never looks at the full moon." "Huh, why ever not?" he asked incredulously. "Remember when I said that as a Saiyan looks at the full moon, they transform into an Uzaru, or great ape? They're giant creatures that will destroy and crush anything in sight. For someone as young as Kakarot, he won't be able to control the form and will almost certainly try to kill us." Gine explained. "Oh my goodness!" Gohan exclaimed. He then remembered that Gine had already covered the great ape stuff while telling her story. He guessed it must have gotten lost in the details of hearing such a strange tale, but seemed to be an important detail now. "Well, I'll certainly keep that in mind," he said urgently as walked past them to an open spot to set his makeshift bed. He then stopped and turned back around. "It only happens if a Saiyan looks directly at the full moon?" he asked Gine. She nodded. Yes. "Would he transform if he saw a half moon or a crescent or gibbous?" he asked further. "No," Gine said, "only if it was a full moon." Gohan said thoughtfully to himself. He set the blanket and pillow down on the floor and went over to a cabinet. Gine was about to ask what Gohan was looking for when he held up two strange-looking contraptions that resembled two darkened lenses of scouters attached together. "I wonder if he were wearing these, would it prevent him from transforming?" He held the contraptions out to her. They were two pairs of darkened lenses held in red-trimmed frames. "What are these?" She took one of them and held it up, inspecting it. "They are called sunglasses," Gohan said. He took the one Gine was inspecting and placed it on her face. "Ooh, I see," she said, finally understanding. "They reduce the amount of light reaching your eyes. Yes, these would definitely help prevent him from transforming." "Perfect," Gohan said with satisfaction. He took the other glasses and placed it on a sleepy Kakarot's face while Gine took hers off. When she saw Kakarot, she burst out laughing. The glasses were comically oversized on his face, their weird design on his innocent face and wild hair made him look ridiculously silly. Kakarot woke up from the sound of her laughing, and him knowing only that his mother was laughing, started to giggle too. The sight of his goofy-looking laughter face being obscured by those glasses made Gine laugh harder, and Kakarot giggle more. Even Gohan started to chuckle too at how goofy the boy looked, and how fond the scene looked to him. Gine laughed wholeheartedly for the first time her life. Free to live in the moment with her goofy little boy. No Frieza, no bloodshed, no survival, no fear, no judgment, nothing but seeing how silly Kakarot looked. Maybe Earth won't be so bad after all. Chapter 2. A New Beginning. The next morning, Gine and Gohan stood before the hut with the splintered front door on the ground. It was mixed with other pieces of cut wood that Gohan had from the pile out back. She held a bucket of nails and a hammer in her hand. "You got everything you need?" Gohan asked. "Yeah, I think so," Gine said uncertainly, looking at the woodpile. "I'll try to have it fixed by the time you get back." Gohan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Whatever you can do will be fine. It doesn't need to be perfect." Gine nodded. "Okay. Anything else that Kakarot will need?" Gohan pointed to the boy in question. Kakarot was sitting on the ground nearby, trying to catch a butterfly from his spot. He fell over, giggling. The sight warmed Gine's heart. "Nah, I think you got everything on the list." "Very well then, I shall return by tomorrow," Gohan said, slinging the basket on his back. "The outhouse is over there." He pointed one way, then another towards an empty drum. "The bath is over there, then towards the forest behind the hut. River is over there, and finally pointed towards the kitchen through the doorless entrance, and feel free to make whatever you like until I return. I really appreciate this, Gine said to him for the umpteenth time that morning. She was still unable to grasp how anyone like him could be so kind to a stranger. No worries, my dear, anything to make your stay here on Earth more bearable, he said kindly and took that moment to start walking, heading for the nearby village he told her about for supplies. Be safe, she called out to him, and Gohan waved back as he walked a path through the trees and disappeared from view. All alone with her son, Gine went about the task of rebuilding the front door. She wasn't very good with tools, let alone primitive ones, so she had to learn how all this worked as she went. Following the instructions Gohan gave her, she arranged the frame in a way that should form the rectangle the size of the entrance and nailed the planks onto the frame. She smashed a finger or two with the hammer a few times, trying to strike the nails perfectly but missing wide. Gah! Gine yelped when she painfully smashed her thumb again and threw the hammer into the ground out of frustration. She threw it hard enough that it buried itself deep into the dirt. Cursing herself and not wanting to lose any of Gohan's tools, she spent a good deal of time digging by hand to find the blasted thing. The soil came loose thanks to her Saiyan strength, but now she was making things worse with digging holes. Kakarot just sat and watched, amused by his mother's struggle. By mid-afternoon she found the hammer and got out of the hole, realizing then that she had just decimated the beautiful grounds the hut stood on in her search. Trying not to let that undo her calm, she got back to work. After smashing one more thumb again and uttering some explicit words, she finally finished the rudimentary door. She gave it a test fitting in the entrance, and it barely fit. Gine also forgot to put in the hinges, so it just sat there more like a cover than a door. Well, at least he said it didn't have to be perfect. She though Riley. Then Gine spent the next hour filling in the holes she dug up, trying to undo the damage done to Gohan's yard. She felt so stupid for causing this, but at least the place wouldn't look like it was pocked with craters. When she was done, she inspected her work, nodding in half satisfaction and half embarrassment. The yard was still a mess, but the door was fixed somewhat, and the holes were packed in. Kakarot rolled in the dirt-packed concaves she filled in, laughing while he did so. Gine went to pick him up, he was almost as filthy as she was. She also realized that they haven't bathed since they landed, too tired to do so the night before. They definitely needed to clean up. Gine took Kakarot to the river with the giant empty drum that Gohan told her was for bathing in. She was flabbergasted at how anyone would use such primitive means, but this should work still. Using only one arm she scooped up enough water from the river with the drum and took it back to the hut. After setting the drum atop a rack of stone and getting a fire going underneath it, she waited for the water to warm up by getting some drying cloths and strange white bars of animal fat that Gohan told her was soap. The sun was almost behind the trees when the water was hot enough. Gine removed her dirt-soaked armor, boots, and pants, then lowered herself into the boiling water with little Kakarot. He seemed to relax as much as she did when they felt how exquisite the hot water felt, savoring it for as long as she could. Gine then took the soap bars and cleaned herself and Kakarot up, washing away the dirt from today and the day before. Kakarot giggled happily when she wiped his face with the soap bar. So silly you are, Gine cooed. She couldn't help but giggle too at how her son tried to play with the bubbles on his face and in the water. Gine felt a little embarrassed bathing outside and wondered if humans in general didn't have modern means to bathe like a healing tank. It felt like she had stepped back in time when Saiyans had yet to develop any forms of technology. But she had to admit that this had some quaint charm to it. When Gine dried herself and her son off then redressed in her armor, dusk was setting in. She went back inside to make themselves dinner. Again, she was unused to using old-style technology. Struggling with cooking pots and open fire pits to heat food, it almost resulted in her burning the hut down. When the fire under the pot got too out of control, she grabbed the handle to throw its overheated contents out the window, only to burn her hand when she forgot that iron pots conducted heat. Instinctively she dropped the pot that spilled the stew of vegetables onto the floor, and knocked some hot embers around, setting fire to some of the fabrics in the rest of the kitchen. With the dry wood of the hut, the fire started to grow fast. Panicking, she ran outside and grabbed the drum of water they just bathed in and completely emptied it onto the fire. The cloud of steam completely enveloped them and blasted out the windows. With the large amount of soapy water she dumped, the fire was out, but now the hut was flooded. The floor completely soaked, some furniture overturned, the pot and some fabrics very burned. The crudely constructed door she rebuilt was on the ground in pieces again, washed out from the rush of water. Kakarot sat at the table and just looked at her, still expecting their meal to be done. Great. Just great. Gine muttered aloud while trying hard not to explode in rage and dismay. She almost destroyed her host's home and all her hard work undone. Not a good second day on her new home world. Giving up trying to salvage the stew, she just split some loaves of bread she found with Kakarot. He whined that he wasn't going to get the big, tasty stew that his mother was trying to make, but the bread was not half bad. After finishing their meal, Kakarot was dozing off and Gine put him to bed. She wrung out some of the fabrics as best she could and swept out some puddles of water to dry out the place. By late into the night, she was done. She'll worry about fixing the door again tomorrow and hope that Gohan wouldn't be too mad at what she did. Gine picked up and straightened the last piece of furniture overturned, then something on the floor caught her eye. There was a plush, violet pillow that looked like it was on top of something. She lifted it to reveal a small glass orb hiding underneath it. It was bright orange in color, and with 4 red stars embedded in it. Curiously, she picked it up and held it in her hand. It fit perfectly in her palm. She wondered what it was but could fathom no idea, but it was rather pretty though. And as Gine looked at her reflection in the orb, she felt a strange sense of ethereal energy emanating from what she held, like the sphere had some great untold mystery or otherworldly power that she couldn't possibly comprehend. Huh, was all she could say as she set the orb on the table she straightened, atop of the pillow which she assumed it was supposed to be where it rested. She wasn't sure, but she thought it cast a subtle but eerie glow. Was it some sort of decoration or memorabilia? Whatever it was, she could ask Gohan about it later. The bed where Kakarot was fast asleep on was thankfully not soaked from her extinguishing the fire earlier. Gine undressed and plopped herself onto it. To a Saiyan who spent a majority of her life sleeping on dirt or in cramped cots, the mattress she lay on was like floating on a cloud. On their first night here, Gine had fallen asleep too fast to truly appreciate it. Now she wasn't as tired, so she could feel the lavishing cotton sheets against her skin, and she wondered how someone like Gohan could live like royalty but also so humbly. With little Kakarot snuggled against her and snoring away, Gine was able to relax, alone with her thoughts. It was the first time since they landed on Earth that she could just lay there and think freely. She tried to not worry about Gohan getting angry at her damaging his house. So instead, she enjoyed the silence of the wilderness outside the window. She wasn't sure how, but something about listening to the sounds of insects, birds, predators, and prey in the night was so soothing, even if they terrified her the night before. Shelter changed everything. It almost made her forget she was on some faraway planet with only her son and a total stranger for company. With no Bardock and no Raditz anymore. The sounds of the woods suddenly did not comfort her anymore. Her breathing became difficult, and vision blurred with tears. Then everything else faded as the grief she had held back for the last 24 hours suddenly overtook her like a tidal wave. Like a dam bursting, Gine let out a mournful wail into her pillow, all of her pain and sorrow rushing out of her at once. She did not care if her sobs woke up Kakarot, Raditz, Her firstborn child was gone. A piece of her own soul as much as her own flesh and blood had been extinguished. And Bardock, the man she looked up to, the light of her life, and the father of her children was gone too. Gine had been around death plenty in her days as a warrior. She knew the realities Saiyans faced in conquering other worlds, it was their way of life. She had almost expected that either Raditz or Bardock would be killed in action someday. But at least then she would have been able to take comfort in the fact that they died in service of Frieza, and for the glory of their world. But now, after Frieza's betrayal, and the complete extermination of her entire species, how could she live with such pain? It felt unreal, like having to live with a knife forever stuck in her heart. There was no answer she could think of that would comfort her. All she could do was weep, and so she did, long into the night, crying until sleep closed in on her consciousness like the despair that had drowned her whole world. But there was one thing she did take comfort in, the knowledge that Kakarot was safe. When morning came, Gine woke up to feel the rays of the sun shining on her face. She grumbled and felt around the bed with her free arm. She hadn't moved from where she fell asleep, and she slept hard. Sore everywhere and feeling numb from the release of all of her emotions the night before. Her arm brushed in the sheets in front of her, and her eyes shot open when she realized Kakarot was not in her grasp. Bolting upright out of bed looking for him, Gine saw that the room was a complete mess. Gohan's clothes were tossed all over the room as if a tornado went through his wardrobe. Some of them were torn, soiled, or both. Gine soon got her answer to what caused all this when her son poked his head through a hole he chewed into on a rather expensive-looking tunic. He smiled so innocently at her, like he did nothing wrong. Her eye twitched. "Damn it, Kakarot," she yelled at him angrily. He flinched, and his happy demeanor was replaced with tears, and let a wail that didn't stop. Gine sighed, regretting her outburst. She shouldn't be mad, he didn't know any better. With her work cut out for her, Gine got up and gathered up all the clothes, sorting out whatever clean ones that were still intact. There were only 2 sets of shirts and pants for Gohan that weren't torn or soiled, and she kept them out of Kakarot's reach. She then gathered up all the soiled pieces and took them to the river, spending the rest of the day trying to clean them out and save whatever clothes she could. By the time she got back, she saw the door on the ground and in pieces, almost entirely forgotten that it was destroyed again. Kakarot was in the yard too, having gotten his hands on the clothes she tried to hide from him and was now wearing, and he still hadn't stopped crying. Adjusting to this world was going to be harder than she thought. Later that afternoon, after Gine finished reworking the door, Gohan returned. When he stepped out of the woods and came in sight of his home, he dropped the basket he was carrying. "What happened here?" he said as Gine ran up to him, looking over the condition of the hut. I'm so sorry," Gine said nervously. I almost burned your house down trying to cook something, and Kakarot ruined most of your clothes. All the holes you see were from me trying to find the hammer to fix the door." "Whoa. Slow down, Gine." Gohan placed a hand on her arm. It was a lot for him to take in. "Let's start from the beginning. How badly did you say it was burned, again?" Gine nervously showed him the damage, how some of the kitchen wall, ceiling, and pot was blackened. Then she showed him the water damage from trying to put it out, and the pile of clothes she tried to save from Kakarot. The boy was in the yard playing around in the dirt piles. That she also had to explain to Gohan that it was from building the door, which, due to the hinges bent beyond repair, had to be moved out of the way like a board than an actual door. Gine was close to tears when she finished, almost certain that Gohan would demand that she leave immediately. "It's no big deal, my dear. Nothing to get too worked up about," he reassured, surprising her. "Now let me show you how to properly clean these, then we'll worry about everything else." He gathered the clothes she salvaged and took them outside. She let out a breath she didn't know she was holding, feeling so relieved. His kindness and patience never ceased to amaze her. Gohan took the mayhem caused to his home very well, and he spent the rest of the day patiently showing Gine how to wash clothes by hand in a bucket of soap and water, not in the river. All the while they kept Kakarot busy with an improvised chew toy they made out of wood, which he chomped right through. He had quite a ravenous mouth, but at least they saved what's left of the clothes in the hut, and he was already trying to walk. After that, Gohan showed her the supplies he brought back from the village. He had bought some extra food, books, diapers, soap, and some fabrics so they could make some clothes for themselves. The books he said he got would be to help Kakarot learn how to read and write this planet's language. She liked that idea, then felt embarrassed as she realized she would have to learn how to read and write all over again too for this planet. Oh well, one thing at a time, she thought. Later that night, Gohan showed her the finer points of cooking with an open wood fire. With the tips Gohan gave her, she was able to get the hang of it and finally let her cooking skills shine. True to her word, Gine cooked up a feast from the animals Gohan hunted for in the forest. She had them skinned and boiled into a proper stew with vegetables and some spices. It was a large hearty dinner she made to pay for the damage she caused and to show her gratitude to him, not to mention to support her and her son's Saiyan appetites. My word, that stew was absolutely delicious, Gine, said Gohan, patting his belly with a look of utter satisfaction. Glad you liked it, Gine beamed. She gathered up the bowls and started cleaning them out. With Kakarot fed, they kept warm by the fire while Gohan worked the seams on a blue tunic he was making for Kakarot. I must admit it was quite a learning experience to cook with an open fire, Gine said, looking into the dying embers. Is there a reason why you don't use a regular stove or something? I mean, no offense, but this seems rather primitive, she asked tentatively. Gohan mused over her words. None taken. We humans do have modern technology, but I chose to live a simple life. I wanted to clear my spirit as a martial artist, and to do that I had to rid myself of modern comforts. Martial artist? Gine asked. Yes. Gohan answered. I study and apply the art of hand-to-hand combat. It has always been my life's passion to perfect it, and to do so I had to give up worldly pursuits to live a life free and untouched by convenience so I could master my spirit without distractions. She was fascinated by this. So, martial arts is a human way of fighting. Well, not necessarily just for humans. But yes, it is basically everything that has to do with fighting with your own mind, body, and spirit without artificial means. Gohan answered. Gine thought over what he said. We Saiyans just called it fighting. But, no artificial means. Wouldn't that make it difficult for conquest or killing? Gohan looked at her. It has nothing to do with killing. Though there are schools of martial arts out there that teach that, I would never want to kill any more than you do. I practice it primarily for recreation, self-improvement, and for self-defense. Really? She asked in amazement. So, no killing needed at all. If that's the type of training you wish to pursue, yes, no killing is needed. Though I don't think killing is ever needed, he answered honestly. Gine mulled over what Gohan said. Fighting without conquest or killing. It was so unfamiliar to her. As a Saiyan, it was like loving to eat but hating food. But she was not like any other Saiyan. She hated killing, and did not have the spirit to seek out a fight. But she still had the combative instincts of all Saiyans, and even a pacifist like her had to scratch that itch once in a while. They were manifested more verbally with Bardock than actual fighting, though some of it did involve trading blows for training purposes. This, martial arts, was rather interesting though. To engage in non-lethal combat for fun and therapeutic reasons without bloodshed. Could you show me some of your martial arts sometime? She suddenly asked. Absolutely. Gohan said enthusiastically. How about tomorrow? We could spar for a bit so I can show you what it's all about. I'd love that. Gine smiled. So would I. Gohan said as he finished the tunic he was working on. He then tried to fit it over Kakarot. The boy squirmed and growled, then bit Gohan's fingers hard, making the old man yelp in pain. Ow! Kakarot! Gine yelled. Her son immediately cowered when he knew he was in trouble. After a sharp look she gave him, he slumped his shoulders in shame and mumbled in gibberish to what was an unintelligible apology. Gine was by Gohan's side tending to his hand. I am so sorry about that. Gine apologized as she cleaned up the deep bite marks and bandaged up his hand. That's okay. Gohan said, wincing slightly from the pain. Your son has quite the survival instincts, or he's just very ill-tempered. He can be violent. Gine said worryingly. He's been programmed since he was born to attack and destroy other living things. Programmed? Gohan asked as he flexed his patched-up hand. Yes. Gine looked to Kakarot then back at Gohan. Saiyan babies are brainwashed for a time before they get sent on their infiltration missions. It's part of preparing them for life as conquerors. Brainwashed. As in, Gohan let the unfinished question hang. Yes. Gine answered grimly. They are bombarded with mental images of battle and death to have their Saiyan thirst for battle amplified and make them into killers born rather than just regularly trained soldiers. Gohan sat in silence for a minute before finally asking, and all Saiyan parents agreed to that. Gine knew what he was asking, that if she let her own son get brainwashed. She didn't feel the need to hide the truth though. Yes, we all did. It's not in Saiyan nature to be much in the way of caregivers. Gohan shook his head slowly. That's barbaric, was all he said flatly. But nothing in it was accusatory towards her. She appreciated that, but knew she was guilty all the same. I know, Gine said sadly, as she picked up Kakarot. He flinched from her touch as if he was expecting to be punished, but Gine just held him tight as she went on. That's why Frieza